Dear colleagues, friends, warm greetings from Istanbul. My presentation today is about culture change in the organizational context and the role of leaders in making this change possible. And I just want to talk a bit about the background, my personal, journey into this point. So I have been working on modeling the impact of culture on organizational phenomena for many years, on human resource management practices, on leadership, on work-life balance issues. But I came to a point where I find myself thinking that culture, or the impact of culture, should not be the fate of an organization. In other words, we should not be saying that in such and such cultures, such and such organizational practices cannot happen and should not happen. But as a scientist, I find myself saying that actually when I was mapping the cultural characteristics onto organizational practices or phenomena. This is implicitly what I was suggesting, actually. And it wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful to organizations that I consult, or, it felt like it's a deterministic point of view. It's a deterministic perspective, which it was. Then I started thinking about, the change, like, how can we make it happen? How can we make organizational practices possible in cultures that, that are not conducive to such practices. Then came this framework of culture change, especially one of the cultural dimensions or characteristics that I wanted to tackle was the culture of power. Because I come from a culture of power. So I see and I observe how kind of maybe toxic that culture may be, and how it makes organizations, stagnated in their, in their struggle to develop and catch up with the world and what have you. And we observe the stagnation and how harmful it can be more and more in the era of rapid change, and most recently, of course, the pandemic. So that's the journey. So I wanted to say something about the possibilities rather than kind of impossibilities. Okay, so that's the story. So I said maybe the next generation leaders are able to make this transformation possible, and I wanted to give them a kind of a roadmap to suggest how it can be. So that's the mandate of the next generation leaders, the young people who are leading organizations, profit, non-profit, in any sector. I'm saying that, this is the new mandate of new leadership. So let me share my screen with you and go through my presentation slides. Okay, so that's the title of my talk, as you know. Now, as I said, the idea was about, was about, how do we make organizations a high-performing place? How do we make sure that organizations are performing well, which is very important for a healthy and a strong society, obviously. So, as I said, this is not only profit organizations, but any type of organizations, big, small, any industry, educational sector, health sector, and what have you. Okay, so the mandate of the organizations these days, like everybody's talking about being inclusive, leveraging diversity. So that's a big theme, obviously. The other one is digital transformation. And the next one is innovation and agility. So those of you who are, in the industrial organizational or work and organizational psychology field know these terminologies. Everybody's talking about that, and these are the key things. So, but unfortunately, we don't have a magic word to make these things happen. We need to find enablers to make these things happen. And I argue that we need a trusting environment, a flexibility in our environment, and engagement, which is a big issue, especially after the pandemic. The engagement rates are extremely low. And what I mean in this context, especially, is the engagement within the workforce, which is very diverse in terms of generations and cultures, of course. So without these enablers, we cannot just achieve the mandate of organizations. And I further argue that the empowering culture is at the root of everything. Without the proper culture, we don't create, we don't end up having these enablers, and we cannot achieve the goals. So the empowering culture that I define have 5 characteristics or dimensions, if you want. Psychological safety, low fear of failure or reduction of fear of failure, motivation of employees through a purpose, by purpose, fun, creating fun environment at work, and shared leadership. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about these dimensions, the characteristics of empowering culture, these 5 dimensions. So therefore, I argue that we need to do something about transforming the culture of power to the culture of empowerment. We have to have that transformation sooner or later. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about why in more detail. But of course, the challenge is to create the culture of empowerment within the culture of power. That is the main challenge. And I propose this kind of 5 pathways or 5 dimensions of empowering culture in a book recently published in Turkish, and it's now being translated into English. Okay. So first of all, let us, remember, most of us, of course, know the power distance dimension of Hofstede and the Globe research and Schwartz and many other, pioneers in our field proposed this idea. And we just need to remember what it is, especially for work organizations. So what does culture of power mean, or high power distance mean? First of all, the loyalty and deference to power holders is the key. So it's not necessarily the loyalty to the organization, but loyalty and deference to the power holders. If it's a family firm, the founders, or if it's an organization, a professional organization, to the top managers or immediate manager and what have you. If it's a school, the teachers, if it's a hospital, the doctors, whoever is the power holder, employees are expected to show loyalty and deference. And loyalty and deference to the person, to the power holder, is more important than job performance, the merit. So these organizations are not meritocratic. They are hierarchical, and the loyalty to the person who is at the top of the hierarchy is more important than showing merit and performing well in order to get ahead, in order to get promoted and keep one's job. Power holders obviously cannot be questioned, and this is not questioned. Like, why power holders cannot be questioned is not questioned. There's a very widespread acceptance of that fact, indeed. Motivation is through fear. People fear their leaders, managers in an organizational setting, and stick and carrot approach is adopted to motivate people. So reward and punishment, so to speak. Interpersonal trust is very low in those type of cultures, in organizations, and cooperation is very low because what matters is to be approved by the power holders. So, people really compete to get the approval of the power holder, and they do not cooperate, and they actually sabotage one another in work environments like this. So when we consider the layers of culture, you know, the power culture or culture of power is pervasive at the societal level. It trickles down to organizational level and then to the team level, and the leaders, of course, behave that way. But I'm arguing that if we want to change things, we can, you know, we can really train the new generation leaders to make the change. So if leaders have a different mindset, an empowerment mindset, which might be difficult and which I'm going to talk about in a minute, that mindset will influence the team's culture. And then if there are sufficient empowerment minded teams in the organizational culture is different. And as an idealist and optimist myself, I'm thinking that that will change the societal culture in a long period of time, maybe, but that change is possible. So I'm arguing that leaders are the change agents, which will trigger the bottom-up change. So one can question whether or not, you know, power culture is at all good. Can it be effective? Perhaps, you know, under certain circumstances, very limited circumstances. But when we look at the scientific literature as to the associations of power culture with some kind of, you know, indices of development, if you want, we see that, you know, it's not at all helping, you know, organizations or society. So let us start from the societal level, whether or not power culture or power distance, you know, creates anything kind of good for societies. So these are the scores, not these, but, you know, I'm going to show you the score of, you know, both Hofstede and Globe research power distance scores and its correlation with other indices, like economic development, for example, like competitiveness index, like countries are ranked in terms of how competitive they are, in terms of, you know, their economic development, their innovation inputs, innovation outputs, achievement in science. Again, there's a country ranking, and the numbers in parentheses are the number of countries that these correlations are based on. So when we look at this list, we see that the higher the power distance score of a country, the lower the economic development, the lower the country is competitive, the lower the innovation input and output, the lower the achievements in science, lower levels of human development in these countries, and these countries are lower in societal health compared to countries which have, you know, low power distance. There are also some positive correlations, but unfortunately not with things that are that we want. So the higher the power distance, the higher the corruption, the higher the passivity in countries, and meaning lack of voice in the face of human rights violations, for example. And the role of governments are strong in those types of countries. So the civil society is weak, but the government is quite strong in these countries. So therefore, the power culture is not, you know, allowing countries to develop in a sustainable way, at least. So one can think about an ideal, maybe is there an ideal score? So we can look at, you know, what people think about power culture. We can maybe say, well, maybe people want it. People are happy with power culture, and they don't want to, you know, they don't want any reduction. To see whether or not this is the case, we can look at the as is and should be scores of the GLOBE project, which I find very useful to convince people that, people don't want it, because there is a real big difference between how the things are as is and how people want it to be, should be scores. So these two things are measured in this project, as some of you may know. I'm going to show you kind of two contrasting country groups or culture groups. Germanic Europe, as I said, there is an actual, what is the score in terms of how things are as is, actual, and then the ideal, how people want it to be, should be, okay? And I'm going to contrast it with the Middle Eastern cultural or country group. So there are many dimensions of culture assessed in this project, as you know, one of which is power distance. So when we look at the Germanic Europe, for example, the as is pretty high, actually. Out of a 7-point scale, the mean score for the Germanic European group is 4.95, whereas that group, the people, survey respondents want it to be much less, 2.51. So there's a huge difference between how power hierarchical the society is and how people want it to be in the future. And the difference is even larger in the Middle Eastern group, and the Middle Eastern group is, higher in terms of current actual practices compared to the Germanic Europe, European group. 5.23 is how things are as is, and 3.03 is how things should be in the future. Now, please observe that people don't want it any lower than 2.5 or 3.03, for example. And it's a mystery, of course, to me, and we can discuss it in our Q&A, why people don't want it to be even lower than that. Okay, but therefore, culture of power is not associating with positive outcomes at the societal, national level, and people do not want it to prevail. People want to have more, more egalitarian, more flat kind of societal structures. How about the organizations? How do organizations with power culture perform, one can ask. And there are really important research about this, which show that and especially with respect to the enablers that we're focusing on, with respect to these enablers, I made a selection of research which shows that culture of power is less likely to be associated with innovation, according to research, employee engagement, which is a big problem these days, meaning there is less voice observed in organizations, and there is less citizenship behavior observed in organizations if there is a hierarchical culture. The success in digital transformation is less in hierarchical organizations, and the workforce diversity is much less observed, much less, or utilized much less. I mean, organizations cannot leverage diversity and cannot really enjoy inclusion in cultures like that. So overall, therefore, I hope I made a compelling case to show you that culture of power is not working well. Okay, it's a threat to sustainability. It's a threat to organizations' viability and societal development. So therefore, we need to really think about the empowerment culture, which I propose to have 5 dimensions. So I'm just going to give you some very brief descriptions of these dimensions, which we can, of course, discuss later on. So I argue that, first of all, an empowering culture has a high level of psychological safety in it. Psychological safety, is a sense of confidence that the team in work organizations will not embarrass, reject, or punish someone for speaking up, for saying something that is against the group norms, for criticizing the practices, for example. Remember the voice issue? That is, feeling free to voice concerns, to voice suggestions, to voice new ideas and what have you, even though other people may disagree. Basically, therefore, it is like, dropping your mask, stopping to pretend that you agree with everything and voice your concern is the psychological safety, basically. And Amy Edmondson from Harvard University does a lot of brilliant work on that. According to Amy's framework, psychological safety is or creates a learning environment in organizations. So psychological safety is not doing whatever you want to do, because in a high performance organization, when there is high performance pressure or high performance meritocratic organizational structures, if you have high psychological safety or coupled with psychological safety, you end up having a learning zone. But if the organization is meritocratic, highly performance oriented, but the psych safety is low, then this is the anxiety zone. So, the higher the psych safety coupled with performance orientation, the higher the learning occurs. Knowledge sharing occurs in organizations. So that's a very critical issue. The second dimension or pillar of empowering culture is low fear of failure. Fear of failure or fear in general is a very typical characteristic of the power culture. People do fear to get reprimands, to get disapproval of the power holders, as you know. So this is a very important thing to work on in power cultures. And in my consulting and research projects, I see that dimension to be very difficult to work on or overcome. So the low fear of failure is about not feeling nervous to test new ideas, okay? Because if people are fearful, they do not, test new ideas. And they try to hide their failures under the carpet, okay? Or blame, others. Scapegoating is going on. So in low fear of failure organizations or cultures, people consider failures as learning opportunities, and they do not sweep the dirt under the carpet or play the blame game. And some organizations actually do, organize failure events where people or groups or teams, work teams, share their failure journeys with others. In a very, again, psychologically safe way, so that everybody can learn from that failure. And that's almost an event to a celebratory event, if you like. Okay, failures are not to be hidden, but to be shared. I like these traditions and these events actually, because it really breaks the mold, if you like. Okay. The third dimension is motivation by purpose, because if you remember in the power culture, the motivation is through stick and carrot or reward and punishment. But in empowerment culture, motivation is through remembering the purpose of what we're doing, okay, in any type of organization, in any type of sector, whatever we do, what is the purpose? So rather than relying on extrinsic rewards like stock options or salary increases or reward mechanisms, we can all keep those things, but not just these things, okay? Rather than just relying on extrinsic rewards only, we need to integrate we need to remind our teams, our employees, our students, if it's a school environment, the values, why we're doing it, okay? What is at stake? And what are we contributing to? This is especially important for the new generation, for the millennial, for Gen Z. They do not really, they do not get motivated if they receive a promise of big money or big promotions and what have you. Actually, another line of research that I work on is the worries about leadership. People are worried about becoming a leader. So they really don't care too much about the power and position and what have you. What they do care is the sustainability issues, rightfully so, because we are at a Anthropocene environment or era. We are at a place, at a stage where our survival is at stake, seriously, really. I mean, if there is any denial to that, we can turn to science and see what's going on. So we need to understand the values of the next generation, which is, if I can just show you a recent survey of Deloitte on global millennials. They want purpose-driven organizations. They want commitment to betterment of the world, demonstrating purpose beyond profit. They deeply care about climate change, as they should. They want to ensure diversity and inclusion. They are concerned about employee mental health and what have you. So the new and the better normal, I would say, after the pandemic, makes these themes even more salient and important for the next generation employees, wherever they may be. Again, they don't have to be in the profit organizations. We are all employees in our organizations, in academia, everyone, every working individual. These things are extremely important. The next dimension is fun at work. An empowering culture creates fun at work. But fun is not about, playing basketball or games, or have, all of a sudden, stand up and dance and what have you. These are kind of called mechanical fun. Mechanical fun in the sense that organization wants you to do this. Organization wants you to have these fun, and there is all of a sudden, organized events around it. And it's almost like another job of yours, okay, to attend these events and pretend that you're having fun and what have you. I'm not talking about that. That's why I say, let me have it, don't mechanically enforce this on me, but let me organically develop events, if you want, or situations and what have you, to have fun in the work environment, okay? One way of doing it is, for example, allowing employees to have job crafting. In other words, shaping their job in such a way that they increase the joy of job. And we can discuss about job crafting in the Q&A more. The other extremely important thing, especially in the new normal, the hybrid work environments and what have you, is allowing people to have recovery. Because as remember the few months after we shut down in the world, we were working almost 7/24. I mean, we were just answering the phones and emails and what have you, and there's absolutely no time for recovery. So fun at work or having a pleasant work environment dictates or requires that there is opportunities for recovery, okay? So for me, therefore, fun at work includes promotion of recovery or moments or hours of no work and silence and what have you. And finally, last but not least, I mean, if we have all of the above, if you like, then we can only have. So if you have psych safety, low fear of failure, motivation by purpose, and fun at work, then we can have a shared leadership environment. Shared leadership is a very difficult, idea to grasp, especially in high power cultures where there's one leader, an omnipotent, powerful man, usually kind of person. So sharing of responsibility and accountability is difficult to tackle. Responsibility and accountability of deciding, on issues, implementing, and controlling can be shared, should be shared. But this is a very long topic to talk about. So I'm not suggesting that shared leadership or co-leadership or collective leadership, sometimes it's called, is always possible. There are contingencies under which it is possible and it is effective. One of the contingency model is proposed by Vroom and Yago in 1988. It's rather old, but it's very, very important. So it's a kind of a decision tree that allows managers, leaders to decide when to share leadership. It really depends, because sometimes they have to be, or we have to be authoritarian, sometimes just consultative, okay, asking the opinions of people, and sometimes completely practice group consensus. So it really depends. Again, we're not going to spend time on this model and what have you, but there are some decision points that can guide us with that. But again, if there is psych safety, failure issues, and fun and all that, the purpose issues are being tackled, then only this is possible. But it is possible. Okay, so we're coming to an end, more or less, where I would like to talk about the resistance to culture change, because we can all think about the wonders of an empowering culture, but ironically enough, culture of power is the comfort zone for people who are in high power distant cultures, and empowerment may be resisted, ironically. And some of the reasons for this resistance is that, forcing power is easy, really. I mean, you get results through fear, you get results through reprimands, you get results through, just ordering people to do things in power cultures. It's really easy, unfortunately, and heartbreakingly, it is easy to make things happen through power. Very sad, actually, but it is easy. So for managers, leaders, teachers, doctors, whoever is managing others, creating empowerment is actually effortful, and it takes time, it takes a lot of patience. So that's why there is this resistance to change, actually, in power cultures. And for people who are under their supervision, under their leadership, for them also, it is easy to obey the rules, obey the power, because they don't take risks, right? I mean, empowerment requires that one takes risks, one takes initiative, one puts extra effort to understand things and what have you. Mind and body and soul, everything should be involved, right? Engaged. But in a power culture, somebody tells you to do something, you do it, you don't question it, the risk is not yours. All you have to do is to say yes and do it, basically. And that's easy. That's a comfort zone. Another barrier to change, culture change, might be learned helplessness. People think, especially in our type of cultures, like, things have been like this forever. There's historical roots, there are societal roots, and what have you, political, social, organizational, everything. in a way enforces, not enforces, but reinforces culture of power. So people may change, when I do consulting with organizations, they say, it's not possible, yeah, it's nice, but, Western societies may do it, but yeah, hocam, which is teacher, we can't do it, really. I mean, thank you for your kind, advice, but yeah, it's not going to happen. So there's kind of no hope, learned helplessness, which is a barrier. And an interesting final resistance point is that although people want less power, remember from the GLOBE project, want less of it, they still want to have it, okay? Yes, I want less of it in my society, but I want to be powerful when I grow up. So people actually want to be the one who has the power and, this omnipotent, the leader, powerful person who kind of creates fear, orders everyone, and then forces obedience and what have you. Interestingly enough, they complain about it, but they want it when they grow up, when the time comes, okay? That is an interesting dilemma as well. So if I were to propose a model, a process model of empowerment with these 5 dimensions of empowerment, I would say start with these 2, motivation by purpose and fun at work, because according to Wake and Quinn's 1999, organizational change and development model, these are the 2 kind of, interventions, if you want, that kind of unfreezes people, because the organizational change, or maybe any societal change perhaps as well, or family change as well, maybe any type of change, requires an unfreezing stage. So there's unfreeze and then transition to a new stage and then refreeze that new reality. So unfreeze, transition, and refreeze stages. And I think, and it hasn't been tested yet, but I'm collecting now data, that if we start reminding people the purpose, okay, of why change is important, and in a minute I'm going to talk about sustainability as the ultimate purpose, and if we create kind of fun activities at work, which is very modest and very, not radically, but, over time, then people may start unfreezing, okay, maybe. So that corresponds to the unfreezing stage, which creates engagement, if you like, creates engagement. People are engaged, there are, they mingle, they are involved, understanding the purpose of why we're doing it and having a little bit of fun, unfreezes people and stimulates engagement. I propose, that's a proposal. Then the transition is like psychological safety, like little by little we talk about failures and how not fearful we should feel about failures, and what is psychological safety of the authentic self, voicing concerns, criticisms, and what have you, and that can bring trust to the environment. We can have more trusting relationships with those in place. And finally, as I said, shared leadership. How do we share leadership? What to share? When to share? With whom to share? What do we do to promote leadership in terms of knowledge, skills, and competencies of people, and what have you, so that we have a more flexible, environment. We can exercise more flexibility. The shared leadership not only supports flexibility, but also trust and also engagement. Okay, so these are kind of the mediating processes: engagement, trust, and flexibility I propose. And finally, so that we can promote diversity, inclusion, digital transformation, like more transparency, more environmental concerns through digital transformation, and more innovation and agility. Again, this right-hand side are the keywords for organizations nowadays. They want these outcomes, but really not paying attention or making investment in the foundational work of culture change. They only want the outcomes on the right-hand side. And I argue that these outcomes correspond to the sustainable development framework, because, for example, innovation and agility is about economic sustainability, digital transformation is about environmental sustainability, and diversity and inclusion is about social impact or social rights, sustainability through social equalities. So, what are the key messages? I argue that culture of power is pervasive. So it's not, yes, it is higher in some parts of the world, but it's very low in some very limited parts of the world, like, you know, Northern European countries, Australia and New Zealand, for example. Other than that, when we look at the map of the world, more or less, we see that culture of power is quite pervasive. There are some very high hierarchical cultures, which are very high, some medium level, but in very rare places, it is very low. So it is pervasive. And the cues are very subtle, maybe very subtle. So the cues of, or the signals of culture of power may be very, very subtle. And in a Q&A session, I would like us to do an exercise to see how subtle the cues are. It is absolutely not aligned. The culture of power is not aligned with the mandate of organizations, and it's a threat to a sustainable future, for sure. Culture of empowerment, on the other hand, is easy to implement. It requires not a radical approach, like overnight we cannot do it, but a stage-wise implementation is possible. The leaders who adopt this idea have to be really genuine about their approach, genuine about their intention, first of all. They cannot just fake it. I mean, unfortunately, you cannot fake it until you make it. In other words, people will understand whether or not it's a genuine thing, okay? So for example, if you want to practice shared leadership and want to gather opinions of people, ask people what they think in order to be empowering, right? And if you say, okay, what do you think about it? Oh, I see. Yeah. Sure. We can discuss that and we can test that. Yeah. Very ingenuine. Okay, your body posture, your behavior does not signal a genuine approach of empowerment, for example. So especially in power hierarchical cultures, these subtle signals are extremely important. People read in between lines and they know whether or not you're not genuine. Okay, and communication is the key. And in our Q&A, we're going to kind of demonstrate some dialogues where there are cues for power and cues for empowerment. And I hope it's going to be more fun in the next period of Q&A. And until then, I'm just going to leave you with some thoughts and hopefully some comments and questions in the next session. Bye for now.